I want to know, I just finished binge watching your show. And I want to know, in the credits, one of the things that jumped out to me is it says producer Maggie Gyllenhaal. So I wanted to know, is that, as an actor, something you always wanted to do? And also, in the context of The Deuce, what additional, if any, responsibilities did you have as producer Maggie Gyllenhaal?
It isn't something that I always wanted to do, but it's become something that I want to do very much. And I think some of that was born actually out of making The Deuce and playing Candy. I mean, because in a way she's a filmmaker, but she's also a producer. I had never done this before. I don't know if you had ever done it before. I had never signed on, could be 3 years, to a project where I didn't have the script.
Right.
I had 3 scripts, which I was told might change, and I was being asked to play a sex worker. And I was like, I don't know how to commit to this without some guarantee that I'm going to be part of the conversation, which has become more and more important to me anyway, as I've, I guess, gotten deeper into my life and my work. I want to be a part of the conversation. But also with no script, I was just like, how do I say yes? I have no idea.
Right.
I mean, you knew that David Fincher was directing all of your show. So like in some ways I didn't know who was directing my show. In some ways with David Fincher at the helm, maybe you just go like, let's go get on this boat and see what happens. I did feel that way in some ways with David Simon and George Pelecanos, but I also was like, look, what are we saying? What are we gonna be saying about sexuality, about feminism, about women, about misogyny, about art? Like, I just wanna be a part of the conversation. So that was how it began. And then, what it actually meant really has continued, because we're shooting episode 2 now, just continued to shift and change. I think it may have been originally just like a kind of a nod to me to make me feel comfortable doing it. And it became like a real actual collaboration where I've learned so much about producing and so much about sort of the whole process.
Like what? Like what has happened? Like what things have, like what has changed as, instead of just being an actor, but as a producer? And like, is it those early conversations? Is it being in the room when stories being developed, or? It's
not being in the room where stories being developed, although we'll have like initial conversations about where the character is going to go. And I mean, for the second season, I really felt comfortable saying, okay, wait, but what about this? And how about a love interest for her? And wouldn't it be interesting to see how this goes and plays out, or whatever? How is this, I can't say, what, but, things like that. And what it really was the first season was like, I would see the cut. I would always have a couple of minor, tiny things, and then some major thing that I was like, how could you cut that? Or you have to get rid of that scene, or whatever. Something in terms of the storytelling that was very, very, very important to me.
Could you give me an example of one thing without throwing anybody under the bus? Or does it feel too like secrets
Yes,
of work?
And then we're gonna talk about you.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I've actually said this one before, but I guess if I can think of
say one you haven't said.
I know, I'm trying to think of a good one. But there's one really like kind of sexy one, which is that scene, if you remember, I kind of have a boyfriend for a minute, or a guy that I'm dating, and we have this sex scene, and Candy doesn't come, and she makes herself come.
Yes.
And that was something actually that I had said to David early on, like there's all this performative sex in it, transactional sex. I want to also see the opposite of that. I want to see what it looks like for a woman to have desire for real, and I want to sort of see a real orgasm.
Yes.
And because there's a lot of ending a scene on people like having sort of fake orgasm.
Totally. That was also in the string of, because one of the things in watching it that I felt made it important to be a TV series and not a film was all the different sex scenes that you have, and all the different men that you come in contact with, and how as the viewer we're forced to go through all the relentless kind of quality of all the different scenes. And then when that scene happened, that was so heartbreaking to me because, first of all, it's the first man that's asked you, if it, obviously because the others are paying for themselves. But that first sort of sense of that sex and intimacy might be a mutual thing where we both get something personal out of it. And the fact that and I want to know if this was something that was in the script or in the staging of it, of the sex scenes, like, because it also killed me that you turned away from him for that, and he put his hand on your back, and it was like she had to get wasted and be faced away in order to achieve something for herself.
Well, he just wasn't it for her. You know, he wasn't enough. And like, but I still do believe Candy can have a real relationship. But in that scene, I saw the first cut and they cut the orgasm.
What?
Yeah, I was like, guys, you have to have the orgasm in. The orgasm is the real. You know, it's in contrast to all the pretend orgasms. And the thing is, on TV and in film, you see a lot of fake orgasms that are supposed to be real. Show us a real one. Yeah. I mean, or one that looks real. So that was one where I was just like, I would not. I was like, I think I may have been a little relentless, you know, and you know, so that was one.
And you got it in.
I got it in, yeah.
Producer Maggie Gyllenhaal got it in.
There
Yeah, totally.
So what are you offering? Next time I get my ass kicked, I can cry on your shoulder.
Ain't gonna be no next time you come with me. I'm gonna have your back everywhere you go, baby.
I have a lot of questions for you. It's, in a way, it's interesting you asking me about the producing because I've always actually imagined David Fincher, who I've never worked with, as somebody where you do have to relinquish control. Where, of course, it's going to work best if you, as an artist, have a point of view and have a full sense of who you are, but that ultimately, if he says stand here because the shaft of light is coming in the window here, you have to stand there. And so, what was that like, you know, to walk into this really long process? You told me it was almost a year you guys shot, and give over control to somebody who you probably had spent very little time with before.
Yeah, I think it's different. You probably feel this way too. With every project, it's a different requirement. And sometimes you're asked to show up and collaborate early on in the process. Sometimes you're a guest star and you come in and don't have a relationship with the crew, but you just sort of come in to do your gig and you leave and whatever. And this, but this with David, the only other time I had this before was I did an Ang Lee film called Taking Woodstock. And that was another filmmaker where I just went, whatever. I know your body of work. I know who you are. I've heard the stories. I've seen all the films. I'm clay. Mold me. I want to be in your world. And with David, it was a similar thing where when you sign that contract where it could be 1 year, it could be 7 years, it could be 5 years, you're sort of signing over your life. I felt okay doing that, living in the world of David. And I'd met him 8 years ago when I had auditioned for The Social Network. And I didn't get it. And I was doing Hamilton on Broadway. And when the Mindhunter audition happened, and got this 50 pages of sides or whatever to read for it, and then flew myself on a day off to go meet with him. And I thought I'd have to go, hi, Mr. Fincher, my name's Jonathan. We actually met 8 years ago on the thing. And I'd done tapes that I'd sent to him, but when I sat down with him in the thing, he was like, I don't need to see the material. I remember you from 7 years ago. The part is yours if you want it.
Really?
Let's talk about, Pittsburgh, living in Pittsburgh. It could be a couple of years. Are you ready for that? And you have to work basically every day for a year and not get sick. So do you feel like that is something that you can? And I was like, what?
Really? You had no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, you knew that he was really interested, and it was a special meeting. You were going to go meet Fincher for real after making all your tapes.
Yeah.
But you didn't know it was going to be yours.
Yeah. And he has this disarming way. He's so intelligent and charming, and he just, And so from that moment, I was like, maybe that was, I was just like, yes, whatever you want. And so to me, the process of doing the show was showing up and wanting to achieve his vision. Chatting with individuals not unlike yourself.
We're just talking. I don't get to go someplace, do a bunch of tests.
No tests, just right here.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yeah.
Tell me one time where you didn't agree with his vision and
Great question.
and what you did.
Great question. The first thing that's coming to my brain is as we showed up with 10 scripts written. So there was 10 episodes, 10 scripts.
Did you cross-board them?
Yeah, so we did episodes 1 and 2, 7 and 8, 9 and 10, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. Those were the blocks.
In that order?
In that order, yeah, which was crazy.
You went back and did episodes 3 and 4 after you'd shot 7 and 8?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And sort of innately, as we started finding our groove with each other and started figuring out, and they started seeing us acting, and I wonder if this is the same way on your show. You can, I'm not to digress, but where they start writing to you and for you.
Love that.
As it goes on, right?
So cool.
Right.
That is my favorite thing about episodic TV.
Yeah.
Is where you feel them like get who you are.
Yeah.
And then respond to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so they were starting to do that, and they were, because we did 1, 2, and then jumped to the end, and we're picking up. They started sort of backfilling things, and my partner and I, they wrote more stuff for us because we had this sort of chemistry with each other. But anyway, to answer your question, they kept figuring out, trying to write how they were gonna evolve this relationship with Hannah Gross, who plays my girlfriend on the show, Debbie. And they hadn't written the end of it yet. And they wrote this scene that I fell in love with, where she's sort of sitting on the porch and I come back and I'm like, what's wrong with you? And she says, well, you're the profiler.
Yeah.
Tell me what's wrong.
I just watched that this
You
morning.
did, yeah. And I kind of profile our breakup.
Yes.
And I thought it was such a brilliant scene because I don't know, I've never seen a breakup scene where there basically is no fight or breakup. It's just a person sort of intellectualizing behavior and what's happening, and then they break up. And they'd written the scene, and I had memorized it and worked on it and showed up the next morning, and it was different, and they had changed it. And I was so in love with the thing that they had done before, but they were constantly rewriting stuff. So that was a moment where I showed up in the morning to rehearsal, and that element had left the scene, and I was like, oh no, and because I think I speak up so rarely, because I'm just sort of, yes, but that moment really resonated with me, and so we ended up doing that scene in the end. But not that I can take credit for it, because the writers and he had already created it anyway, but it was moving in another direction, and it sort of moved back into the direction it was formerly. It's hard to pick a thing where you're like, I don't agree with his vision, because his world and his point of view is so specific that it's like, and gosh, I feel like I'm just giving David Fincher a blowjob in this interview, but
Come be on The Deuce.
right, exactly. But
Didn't he ever come up to you and give you a note where you were like, either like, I just actually played that, or that's exactly what I am trying not to do, or did that ever happen in the 10 months that you never?
Isn't that crazy?
Wow, I really am envious
Is that
of that.
crazy? But it's also a mindset. It's like it's again, know your spot, know your moment. That to me, like the dynamic that it was this similar with Ang Lee, where with Ang Lee, you wanted to do it first and then have a conversation. It's like he's gonna ask you to do something, and then you do it, and then he sees if it's working or not. But it is also my innate kind of quality as an actor, is I'll usually jump first before I think about it. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, about point of view and what you bring, and having like the thing that you said to me a couple weeks ago when we were talking about having a secret on set was really a revelation to me, about coming to set as an actor with something that's just for you, that only you know you're playing, and like you find a way to work it into what's happening.
If you want to, that is. I mean, we don't have to talk about anything at all if you don't want to.
Why are you so tense? You're tense right now.
No, I'm not tense.
If I could ask you now to like throw it back onto you, what do you feel like, is there something with Candy in the first season that you were holding on to that was private to yourself that you now feel comfortable revealing? That you never really talked about as producer Maggie Gyllenhaal, or never really talked about with the directors?
It's not so much that I think you have to have like a secret, because that could be kind of a heavy job for yourself to come up with like, what's my secret for the day, you know?
Yeah.
But more like, I look at the scene and I think, I don't know, I try to make space in my mind or something to see what like reverberates about the scene with me, like what's going on with me that somehow distantly is the reason why this job came to me now. And like when those things are in connection with each other, usually really interesting stuff can happen. And those things I never talk about to anybody. And no. Sometimes I'm just so excited about it that I'll just come in and I'll say.
Yeah.
And I see younger actresses sometimes come in to like a rehearsal and just tell the director like every single thing that's on their mind. And I'm like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, right.
But I never say. And that's one difficult thing about this producing thing is that, or being in conversation is like, look, there are things that were important to me to have happen to Candy, or ways that a scene ought to go. And once you've hashed it out in a kind of intellectual way with somebody else, it can be hard to get back into the really sort of secret place in your mind that's just yours. So what did you ask me? What could I reveal now? I don't even remember.
Because it is maybe just kind of like a personal thing about a certain scene where you think, wow, this is today, something my daughter did or something is making me feel.
I think I was really curious about exploring how women, how I use my body, my sexuality in my work, to articulate things that nobody's listening to any other way. And so I don't know how conscious I was of that, but as I was making it, I started to go, there's been a lot of projects of mine where the conversation has been about sex as a way, I think not necessarily consciously, of getting people's attention so that we could talk about some other stuff. And I think that's what Candy's doing ultimately with porn. She's like, okay, yeah, porn, sex, whatever. But what about the filmmaking? What about the lights? What about an interaction between people? And like, if you put the camera here, you're telling this story, but she has no other way in except for the sex. And that's where she gets her power, and that's where she gets her key in the door. And I don't know, all those things are on my mind.
Give your number to my secretary.
See, what always f***ed me up about you was, what the hell some high-class acting, movie-looking individual was doing down here to begin with?
So Maggie, I imagine that this job, The Deuce, had its challenges. I don't know if you find the sex scenes liberating or awkward or whatever. I want to ask you that question at some point. But speaking of challenges, is there a challenging moment that you can remember in your vast career that you overcame, that you remember?
Whew. Oh gosh, you know, I think I'm so sensitive. You know? And I care so much always that like I get so sad, you know, when like I'm not heard or somebody misunderstands me, or do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think this isn't like a specific moment, but I think in general, I've gotten a little better about like sort of listening a little more, seeing other people's points of view as collaborating artists while we're working together. I'm always good about doing that with actors. I'm so interested in actors. I love finding myself across from somebody and like just seeing where they're weak and scared and where they're strong and where like stuff is flowing out of them. I love that.
Yeah.
But sometimes like I get, I don't know how to explain it. I made a movie this summer with a director who I adore, and she and I sometimes disagreed, but was with the utmost respect. You know, it flowed both ways. And I don't know, I guess it's not really an answer to your question. I don't know. I guess that is the kind of collaboration I'm interested in having. It's like, that's how you can get through difficult things when there's respect. You can even argue.
Yeah.
I mean, although I would really rather not argue. I'm so sensitive and I have to go act, you know.
Right.
But I think if you respect each other, anything can happen, you know. How about you? Have you had a really challenging situation that you got through?
I can't think of a specific situation, but in retrospect, I think the most challenging thing that I've experienced with work, and it's an ongoing process, is being comfortable enough to actually bring myself to everything. Both in the work, I think when I started acting, it was a form of escapism, where it was a safe place to go, where I could be emotional and be angry and whatever. And it was almost like a compartmentalization. But then, and part of that too is coming out of the closet. For me, was a big deal when I was 23, and finding a way. Now I'm now 33. Over the last 10 years since that's happened, to continually show up as myself and express, I think we're talking about a similar thing, and be able to express your own personal opinion, both in the work, but also just showing up on a set as yourself and feeling comfortable enough, warts and all, fears and all, to just sort of be who you are. And I think I think people other than actors experience that too. I think probably people that have any kind of job, it's a challenge to, on a daily basis, bring yourself to your work in a real, authentic way.